Welcome back to the Morning Cover Podcast, and it's me, Alan. Today, I'm joined by Justin Waite, who's a transport manager from the Breedon Group. Justin is an experienced transport manager with a wealth of experience. Amongst other things, we discuss the importance of customer service in last mile logistics, and how although you can work to a national standard, you can still very much treat people as, well, people. We also discuss the importance of compliance, and how it is integral to any business, but of course, already you know that. But, speaking of compliance, are you a transport manager looking at ways to make your fleet even safer? Then you definitely need to check out the Transport Managers Collective, the #1 digital community specifically aimed at transport managers wanting to improve safety and compliance of their fleet. So yeah, go ahead and check it out, the TMC. The link will be somewhere right now. Anyway, this was good fun. Let's dive right into the show. Yeah, so, hey, how's it going?
Very well, thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Justin, for... I realised I said hey without saying hey, Justin, for our listeners. I apologise for that. So, hello, Justin. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Alan.
There we go. It's almost like we've not rehearsed this. As I was saying before I hit record, there is no plan when we do this sort of stuff. It just kind of I just hit record and we start. So I'll do a brief intro and I'll let you to kind of take over and just kind of give me your background so our listeners know, put kind of context around this chat. Justin works at Breedon. He's the transport manager for a region I'm not aware of. Which region are you part of?
I look after the East Anglia region for Breedon. So
there you go. So I was
going to say it covers Norwich down to Essex, really, and across to Cambridge.
There you go. So Justin and I met a few years ago when he worked at Tarmac. We were going in there and talking kind of bollocks. This was all pre-hub, I think it was, when we started talking. And obviously you've gone on to pastures new. I wanted to kind of get a chance to kind of hear your story, really. And as the new direction of the podcast is going with real life stories, I kind of thought you'd have some interesting stories to tell. So in your own words, do you want to kind of kick off and just kind of give me a bit of background about kind of who you are and kind of where you came from, really?
Yeah, that's no worries. My name is obviously Justin, as Alan so nicely introduced me. I've worked in logistics now for about 23, 24 years. I came across to logistics from an engineering background. I got completely sick of engineering, so I decided I wanted to do something else and fell into logistics, as most people do. I worked initially for a small local haulier, went from there to working for one of the construction majors, which was Aggregate Industries, which was my first toe in the water of construction logistics. Aggregate Industries went through various shutters with their haulage procurement, and I ended up working for TDG, which didn't really suit me. I took a redundancy from TDG, worked in a couple of smaller roles, and then I was quite happily settled down living in Derbyshire and working in pharmaceutical haulage. So euphemistically, my business cards used to describe me as the biggest drug runner in the UK, as we had 50 plus Arctics running pharmaceutical items around the UK and into Europe. Then my wife, as she always does, decided to disrupt my life by her job moving from the north to the southeast. So we up sticks, moved to the southeast, and I came back into working in construction logistics with Tarmac, as Alan previously mentioned. I was with Tarmac for 8.5 years when I decided, went from working as the role originally being a transport account manager to being a regional transport manager for Tarmac's eastern area. I was then a regional transport manager for Tarmac's Midlands area, which encompassed the whole of the East Midlands, the whole of the West Midlands, across into Wales, and looking after the HS2 logistics feed for Tarmac. And eventually I got a bit fed up with travelling, shall we say, because I was travelling up to the Midlands every week. The dog used to bite me on a Friday afternoon when I got home, so it was time to move on. So I came across the Breedons because, fortunately, the East Anglia role for Breedons came available, and being I live smack in the middle of East Anglia, it was the right time and the right opportunity.
Yeah,
and here I am now.
So, what has been your sort of role? Has it been the same sort of role throughout your whole career, or have you kind of done a variety of things?
It's as with transport, I think everyone has to be a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Yeah.
So I've shipped, I've managed, I've driven, I've mechanicked, but primarily it's been as a transport manager, certainly for the last, and also depending on who you're working for. So in working with the pharmaceutical industry, we were running our own fleet. So there was largely responsible for compliance, maintenance, fuel purchasing. Working for Tarmac, as we all know, is primarily an independent contract haulier fleet. There it's effectively looking after the customer service element, and it's more of an account manager role in a business such as that. Yeah. Working with Breedon, it's a split of the two, as Breedon run a considerable size own fleet, as well as having an independent contract haulier base. So I'm an account manager and a transport manager at the moment, and a psychologist and a doctor and everything else.
Well, how do you find balancing kind of the mixed fleet, as it were, between kind of independent and also own fleet currently?
That's an interesting one. I quite enjoy it because it's a challenge. It becomes even more important to make sure you've got the right fleet and the ability to flex that fleet to meet the commercial requirements of the job. Because within the construction industry, we know that we're dead December and January. Come end of February, March, we might be massively busy right through till September and October. And it's the secret is having a resource to flex between those two, so that you don't have a massive amount of people in December where they're not working and they're going bankrupt, and you have enough haulage coverage in the summer to cover all your work and you're not losing customers.
Yeah. Do you find that easier when you have that sort of mixed fleet between the two, so you can kind of flex as necessary? I think
I do find that easier.
Do you find, and also the other thing is, do you give preferential treatment to one or the other? Is it okay? I don't mean that underhandedly. I mean, is there a legitimate we go own fleet first and then independent contractors, or is that not how it works?
You have to, because my own fleet is my own fleet. However, the way in my specific area it's split out is that the vast majority of Breedon operated fleet runs the vast majority of my aggregate and asphalt haulage. My ready mix fleet, the vast majority of that is an independent contract haulier fleet. So it's not a great deal of conflict between the two, but there can be in that situation. If you've got contract hauliers not earning enough money and you've got Breedon fleet earning money, your contract hauliers will go elsewhere because there are other majors that will employ them. Yeah, you know, so you have to be very aware of that.
Are your contract hauliers like? I know it depends on the main contractor as to how they structure this, but I know that some, are they branded vehicles, the independent contractors, or are they
anyone that's contracted which is branded? If we go outside of that, then we'll obviously bring in non-branded guys. So if you have particularly, large volume areas, you might want to bring in hire trucks, but then that's obviously outside of the contract arrangement anyway. So all the contract hauliers are liveried.
I think the reason I ask is, are they allowed to go and do other work elsewhere when it's quiet?
Yeah, I would encourage them to go and do other work elsewhere when it's quiet.
Okay, yeah.
Because that means they have a more secure business, better able to serve my business needs.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it is kind of vitally important that contract hauliers survive, because it's kind of, you need them. So it makes sense to encourage that. We interrupt this program for a special report. Not really, just me again. So, you've done your CPC exam. Now, let's prepare for the real world of transport with the TMC Mentor Program. Join a mentor group on the TMC and get weekly calls plus a private group chat with an experienced transport manager to help guide you whilst you make your first steps into the world of transport management. To find out more, go to tmcollective.co.uk and see how a TMC mentor can help you get ahead. Anyway, that's enough from me. Now back to, me. I think we were talking about preferential treatment and encouraging hauliers to go elsewhere when it is quiet, so they kind of maintain a sound business, because obviously it is important.
Yeah, I would encourage any contract hauler that work for any major not to kind of have all his eggs in one basket, and to work for at least two, if not three, other clients, so they've got a balance of work. So if anyone,
when we started, I think some of our listeners, this has come up when I was speaking to John, obviously one of our earlier, obviously your ex-colleague, which is where this whole kind of thing came from. But, excuse me, we've obviously got a lot of contract hauliers that are our customers, our kind of our core business around what their compliance software does. And I get conflicting kind of things from them saying, "Oh, we are allowed," or "Oh, we aren't allowed to go and work." As in, so as a company, you can do whatever the hell you want. Like, this is your company. You are the owner. You're the director, if appropriate. You can do what you want, but the contracts of the vehicles, if it's branded and liveried up as kind of a main contractor, I've never seen the contractual agreements that these organizations have, but I've been told kind of that they're not allowed to go and do kind of other work with those vehicles, unless given permission by their TAM or something.
And the clue is in the title that most people use, which is independent contract haulier. You are therefore an independent business. Most of the contracts, or the way the contracts are structured, mean that the contract holder, so whether that's the construction major holds that contract, should have first call on that vehicle's availability.
Yeah.
But after that vehicle should be free to work, to generate, because any independent business, so small haulier that's operating in that area, doesn't want to park a truck up, lose the revenue stream from that truck for a day because his particular main contractor hasn't got work, but the guy at the quarry next to him has got work. I also look at it from my perspective within Breedon's. I feel that if I've got a site that's operated or a Breedon livery truck taking material to a competitor's site, that's the best advert I can get, because suddenly they've got a big Breedon truck.
Well, there is that. I think that's actually not a bad. I never really thought about that way. Actually, it's actually, you should actually encourage it almost, because it's just like it looks like you're working on jobs that you're not working on. I like that. I like that.
I'm going to put.
I like the way your mind works.
Yeah, put the sales office phone number on all the trucks.
Yes. Yeah. You do a competition hashtag on the site, give people photos of it, and really kind of like sell the dream. So yeah, I think. Do you find Breedon's and Tarmac and AIs, they are obviously have different operating structures and stuff? Is there bits of one that you really like as an employee, as an account transport compliance role? Is there an ideal?
I at the moment I'm really enjoying my time with Breedon. I find Breedon has a far more locally managed entrepreneurial structure, which enables people within specific areas to make decisions that benefit those areas. A lot of the other businesses tend to be far more hierarchical. So if you want to change something, that has to go through a number of layers of management before you can change that. By the time the command comes down from above that, oh yes, you're allowed to do that, the opportunity is no longer there. So in Breedon's, it's almost like a... Is it... Sorry. No, you're right. I don't want to say what I was going to say anyway. I was just thinking about that, but I'll get something to do with a minute. I'm not careful.
I know. We did, obviously, just for listeners' benefit, we did have like a bit of a discussion before we got on air of like, if there's anything we're not allowed to talk about for commercial reasons, just put your hand up. And I think that was almost getting to that point. You self-regulated. Well done there. I guess, I mean, I know. Is Breedon's got national coverage?
Breedon's got fairly much national coverage. Yeah, we've got from probably there's some areas where we've got gaps, but pretty much across national coverage. So the southwest, Wales, across the Midlands, obviously into East Anglia, down into Essex, not really very much south of the river in London, right up into Scotland. So we have got fairly much national coverage. There's a few holes, but not very many.
But it's not, you're not regional in like just cover one area. You actually do have
it is a national business now.
And how is, I mean, this might be a hand up, we'll see. What's the sort of strategy of how Breedon's grows? I think you mentioned it off air.
Breedon's has grown quite a lot the last few years, both organically and by acquisition. At the moment, Breedon's is going through a consolidation period where those acquisitions are being consolidated in to the main business, and that site's quite an interesting time because we've got a bit of a clean slate to actually say what do we want to do and how do we want to do it, and what's the best operating model. So as it's brought in various bits from all over the place, that's now happening, and it's quite an interesting time within Breedon because of that part of the role. That's a part I'm really enjoying.
Are you actually involved in that sort of, obviously being kind of a regional transport manager for an area? Are you privy to those discussions? Is this a company-wide thing, or is it just kind of...
Being as I've got quite a big gob, I get involved in them. Because I'm not backwards about making my opinion known.
Yes.
You've known me long enough to know that.
Beforehand. I have, yes, and I think it's why we have this hand rule of things you're not allowed to talk about. I do like the fact you did ask for this recording to hear it back before I hit publish, just in case you want to get it ratified.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Anyone, so
I don't get my P45 at the end of it, Alan.
Well, exactly. Yeah. You're quite enjoying what you do. So going back to the original question of like the consolidation, like, I'm guessing you're taking things you've learned from Tarmac AI and other kind of
23 years of working in the industry. You start to kind of get a feel for what you think is right. You know, I've worked with some incredible people in the industry, some massive learns from them. I've been really privileged like that. Some really good guys, and you can pick up. And what I'm trying to do is cherry pick the best bits and make sure that as we build this model, that's what we get in there, you know, and also miss out some of the flaws, because what tends to happen is with construction, a lot of construction majors, they always look at logistics as a bolt-on. So they're concentrating on removing aggregate from the ground, making concrete, making asphalt. They don't give much thought sometimes to how they're actually delivering that product to the final customer. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to make sure that I can jump up and down and get that information back into the business.
Yeah, I think it's, from my experience, it's like, transport is just, we have to use transport to get it there. That's as far as I give a shit about it, basically. Whereas I think it's really important. I think the customer service that last mile delivery can deliver to customers, I think is paramount, actually.
It's looked as very much a black cost because the business sees millions of pounds going out the door, but they don't see what that's bringing them. And it is the customer services. I was on a site a couple of weeks ago, on a ready-mix delivery site, doing quite a large concrete pour. And the site supervisor says, "We are so glad to have you guys. The previous supplier we were working with told me my concrete was going to arrive at 12. It didn't get here till 3, which meant it's cost me thousands of pounds to have 10 blokes and 2 concrete pumps sat there." He goes, "And as a result of this," he goes, "we will never do business with them ever again." You know, so it is an absolutely vital thing.
I mean, it's not. It's similar in like when we get inquiries. I always make sure that one of the team, and we're not as structured as having a sales team. We have we all pitch in and doing it. A small company, it's what it is. But I make sure that we kind of reply to any inquiry within 5 minutes, because people, the tone you sets the entire relationship.
The business. Exactly.
Yeah. So I was reading something on LinkedIn the other day. It was something like, when you choose a supplier, yes, I run a software company, so this is kind of tailored towards that. It's like, you can have 100 features, or you can have 10 of the best features, and you can go and customers will, or prospects will, do their research and they make sure that you can do everything you can do. But actually, sometimes, more often than not, what they do is they choose the supplier they most get. Suppliers of software, same. The thing that sets you apart is your customer service. And when you're talking to sales, are you feeling pushed into making a decision? When you send an email, it gets a response in time? Are people polite and courteous and actually wanting to help you as a business? That's the thing that makes a difference. At the end of the day, concrete. It's so regulated in terms of the strength of it. For example, you can't unless you work with absolute cowboys, concrete. But how you facilitate that kind of delivery is, I think, massively important. So I think it's a really important.
Yeah, that's kind of your USP.
Yeah,
it's interesting talking about that, because one of the things that I always, when I talk to drivers about, and I always describe a driver as a brand ambassador. So when you're driving around in a
livery
truck,
yeah,
no matter who it's liveried for, whether it's liveried for Breedon or it's liveried for Tarmac, for Hanson's, for Aggregate Industries, you are a brand ambassador. You're the shop window for that business, because the only time a man in the street or a member of the public is going to have any contact with your business is when he sees your lorry going past. So if he sees a lorry going past that's absolutely caked up to the armpits in mud, filth, and it spills a load of concrete on his bonnet, he's not going to be very keen on your business. If he sees a well-presented, nice-looking truck going down the road, if that chap's buying aggregates, asphalt, concrete, ready-mix, whatever, oh, I've seen a Breedon's truck. That was nice and clean. That was nice and tidy. The driver was polite. He waved me out at the junction. I'll put their business that way. So I've always described drivers as brand ambassadors, because that's what they are. They are effectively the shop window.
And I also think kind of mood and temper is heightened on our roads. I think when you have a good experience, you really do talk about it. When you have a bad experience, you really do talk about it. And I think more so than in general kind of life. I think I drove to pick up my sister from the airport this morning. I was up the M25 at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there were like tarmac trucks out, obviously doing their first runs of the day and stuff. And I think there was one guy let me in. I was on the slip road. He kind of slowed up and let me in. I was like, I specifically remember that happening, and I will talk about a nice experience on the road far more than a nice experience out on the street. I think out kind of as a pedestrian or in the workplace, you talk about, like, we're so heightened on the road in terms of like emotions. That positive experience is really important.
That's even more so for the guys. I like
the brand ambassador.
Yeah, that's even more so for the guys that are driving those trucks, because you're driving for an hour a day. They're driving for up to 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
So they're spending a lot of time out in that environment. And so the stresses are multiplied, and the opportunities for incidents and accidents. I've seen some horrendous footage of near accidents, and had drivers working for me that have come so close to in horrendous accidents and all sorts of things, even if it's not been their fault, that they then walked away from the industry because they can't cope with that emotional state. There was one incident when a small child walked out in front of an 8-wheel tipper.
Oh, my God.
You saw this little ginger head disappear into the blind spot on this 8-wheel tipper on the video when we downloaded the footage. And it's probably about 1.5 seconds. It seems like forever until you see this little ginger head pop up again, because a lady at this particular location had left her garden gate open. The toddler had walked out in between two cars, directly into the front of the tipper. The driver was fantastic. His reaction time was brilliant. How he stopped that truck that quickly, I will. We'll edit all of that bit out, and because that's fine, because I recorded the entire conversation, because I can't hit stop on this and then restart. So Elizabeth can have great fun editing out your conversation there. But I think it does highlight. So was that? No, I won't ask, because that's on air now. No, I was going to say, is that fairly indicative of kind of what your day job is, though? Like it's moving things around and checking for like availability and ensuring
and
we
stuff,
can ensuring we can cover the commercial requirements of the business. That's if we can't cover the commercial requirements of the business, we won't pay the mortgage, we won't feed the kids, we won't run expensive cars and motorcycles, as I like to do.
Well, yeah. I think it's sometimes we can get quite caught up as compliance-based individuals and just think about kind of almost box ticking for the sake of box ticking, but actually it's important to understand that you fit into a bigger picture into a business, and works both ways. Like what's commercial really aspect has to be reflective of the compliance, but it is important to see that compliance is not the most important thing. It is as important as every other bit of a business.
Yeah, what happens in a lot of businesses, and it doesn't happen, certainly doesn't happen in the eastern area of Breedon, is a lot of businesses become what I would describe as siloed. So the ready-mix part of the business will only discuss ready-mix operations. The commercial part of the business won't talk to the operations part of the business, because they're focused on their customers. But unless you join the dots, you'll never have a cohesive business, because everyone has to understand everybody else's problems and issues, and when you can understand them better, you work better together to resolve any problems you may have. So the phone call I just received that we have to break for is a commercial manager. The job has changed next week. It's now completely different to what it was. Can you go and do it? Okay. Well, I'm sure I can, but I just need to confirm with people I can do. So that was what that phone call was all about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important that we're a team of 7 or 8. Like we're a small team. We all sit round the same table. Like literally in the office, there's like 8 desks, and we all, apart from one that's remote, like we all, apart from Kai that works remotely, we're all in the office most of the time together, and you can't not kind of know what's going on with everyone else, and it means you don't have those siloed pots of things, and I think that's really important.
I'm a big fan of open plan offices. So in our particular office, there's an operations manager sits in there. There's the commercial manager sits in there, and I sit in there, and you all overhear each other's conversations. Apart from when I get cross and have to turn around and tell them to shut the fuck up because I can't hear what the hell's going on.
I think, there is balance. I mean, I've actually, I know we tried recording this podcast last week, and I mean, I don't want to kind of ruin the screen too much for our listeners and viewers, but we're not a professional podcast outfit. I mean, I'm a software company. I just like talking to kind of cool people. But I'm currently at home in my office sort of thing. Like I can't do this in my work office because we don't have a studio. And we work in an open plan office, and it's not just our business in there. We work in like a co-working space. So I can tell my team to shut the fuck up, but I can't tell the rest of the office to do that. So, and normally on a Friday it's dead, but last Friday for some reason there was people having pizza parties and stuff, which is a nightmare. But yeah, so I also think that it's not just the clear communication and talking to people in an open plan office. I think there's an element of like, I think it's better for mental health. Personally, I think the connection with other humans, I think, is a really important part of it. Do you find? I mean, I know you're obviously at home at the moment. When you are in the office, do you find that you are, I think happy is the wrong word, but do you feel supported in your role?
I do. That's another really good thing about, let's say, my current employer. I do. I think there's been a lot of attention to mental health in the construction industry over the last 4 or 5 years. I've certainly noticed an increase in it being talked about, and I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah.
It is also interesting to talk about the loan thing. It's interesting because when you're a driver, although you're surrounded by people, you're actually in your cab. You're working on your own most of the time. You know, this is why I always feel that drivers, any drivers that are watching, you have to forgive me now, are a bunch of moaning bastards most of the time because they don't actually have a chance to unload at people. So when they get back to their office, Weybridge, depot, wherever, they've got the frustrations as we were talking about earlier. They've just done 20 miles through miserable traffic, had 3 people pull out in front of them, some bloke on his phone flicking the V's at them because he's getting in the way. You know, they need to unload that, and there's a massive amount of pressure on driver mental health, and it's good, and they need that. So I'm quite happy when drivers get back to where I'm working now. I have a very kind of open door policy. If you want to come and moan at me, and most of them do come and moan at me quite frequently, that's absolutely fine, as long as it's a genuine moan. You know, because part of my job is to improve their working environment. Yeah.
So I was say, apart from allowing them to moan at your door, what other things do Breedon / yourself do with your drivers to kind of support their mental health?
There are sort of helplines that are public. We make very available. There is the fact you can come and sit down with me, and we'll go through whatever you need. But it's primarily helplines. We will issue toolbox talks on mental health to drivers to make sure that they're aware. And it's important. So I think all of Breedon's transport managers have a very open door policy to talk to people about mental health. We have qualified mental health first aiders in the business, you know, and some of the drivers have actually done the mental health first aid course. You know, and they get a little badge. Cool. I'm a mental health first aider. Come and talk to me about your problems. Everyone just laughs at you. I'm not talking to you about my bloody problems, mate.
Well, but that's kind of part of the problem, though, isn't it? I mean, I don't know what the gender split is specifically within Breedon's, but I'm guessing it's male dominated, like every other part of the industry.
It is male dominated. We have 3 in my current fleet. I have 3 female drivers. Strange enough, all of them names begin with E. So as long as you're a female and your name begins with E, you can come and drive for us. You know,
There you go. Perfect.
Three of them are they're three of my best drivers. They're really, really good. You know, really do.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know how sexy it is if you say, most of them, I don't think they have problems, because if there's a problem on site, they flutter their eyelids at someone and they can get away with absolute bloody murder. You know, but they're all really good drivers. They're all.
I think that's it. I mean, I would happily say I'm a feminist. I want to support kind of equal rights, but unfortunately, we're not equal in many areas. So we have to shout about women and support them. But I think, I mean, some of my favourite guests I've had on the podcast have been females on the in transport, and I think it shouldn't take a special sort of person, but it tends to take quite a confident individual to come into.
To progress in this industry as a woman, I think you have to be a very strong person. When I worked for the pharmaceutical haulage, the logistics director there was female, and she was a fantastic lady. And she'd gone and worked up. She'd been with the business since it started, you know, and that had always been her thing. And she built that the transport side of that business, not the warehousing side, but the transport side of that business. And she was, as I say, talked about earlier, met some really strong, some really good people that you take learns from. And she's one of the people within the industry I would take a lot of learns from, because she'd had to do it.
Okay.
And you say despite being female, but that's wrong. She'd done it with being female, and she was very, very good. You know?
I think I would have said the same word of despite being female. I think I want to put context around that before anyone soundbites that out. It's harder the way you're treated as a woman in transport. So to be able to achieve so much is a testament to how hardworking someone like that is.
Exactly.
Not because they are weak and not able to do it. I think it's because men make it harder for them to do their job.
There is a vision, I think, that most, like the vision with lorry drivers, is they're all overweight, overaged, eat too much greasy food, you know, smoke loads of fags, and that's not the vision of a modern lorry driver. A modern driver is now a professional. You know, the tests you have to go through to achieve your license, the ongoing training you have to go through to maintain your license, it is a profession. You know, and the country realised that, I think, during the pandemic, when all of a sudden there was a shortage of lorry drivers, and they went, oh my God, what do we do? And go, well, you have to recognise the fact that there was a
shortage pre-COVID. I think, COVID and Brexit haven't helped.
I don't think Brexit made that much difference. I really don't. I don't think it was there. I think it was more of a... No, within the construction industry, there is a large number of sort of what I would describe European accession state drivers, but an awful lot of them, certainly the ones that I know, had decided they wanted to make their life in England, and they stayed in England or in the UK. So very few.
I guess I want to be quite careful. I don't need to be very careful. I guess it's very easy to get caught up in kind of media and hyperbole and stuff, and I don't want to fuel a fire. But I think, that's it really. My view is I thought that was the way it was, but I also know there's been a shortage of drivers for years.
I think what
COVID highlighted it, but there's always been a shortage of drivers.
An ageing demographic of drivers, and I think that's going to be the next thing they hit. So it's interesting to look at your demographic spread. And one of the things that Breedon do, which is fantastically well, is we have an annual apprentice driver cadre every year, where we bring a number of apprentice drivers into the business. And, you know, I was really proud. I'd taken my first two guys from not having a driving license to now being fully qualified drivers. They both finished their apprenticeships last week. You know, they're now both full-time driving for Breedon. And it's fantastic. One is a young lad who is absolutely fantastic. And the other one is an older guy who was having a career change, you know, and it's introducing how you get people into the industry, because especially for owner-operators, the financial barriers to industry entry are massively high now. To buy a truck, to have the financial standing to, you know, with the traffic commissioner, to, if you're going to work for a construction major, you have to put the diesel in that truck for 2 months. You have to feed your family, pay your mortgage, do everything. You know, it's a very, very massive financial undertaking. You could possibly go and buy a terraced house in some areas of the country for the financial undertaking, probably buy 2 terraced houses in particularly rough areas of the country. for a financial undertaking you're making to set up as a contract haulier for a construction major.
It's why I think although 70% of O licenses are under 10 vehicles, I don't think the long-term success. I know we've got some customers that are owner drivers, and it's just them themselves a truck, and they're very successful. They've been doing it for decades, and they're happy doing that. It's the right size for them. But I think they are somewhat in the minority because it's hard. Margins are razor thin. You kind of only work with this at scale to a certain extent, and I think the more successful hauliers that we see are the ones that have, as we said at the beginning, trucks in multiple kind of suppliers,
operations,
but also operations, but not one or two trucks. Like they have up to 10, 15 vehicles, and these are the ones that seem to be more financially secure.
You have the economies of scale.
More,
at that point, you get the economies of scale, which pay off, and I think work very well. And I can see it's the financial hurdle to get into the business. If you're buying a second-hand truck, you're looking at paying out probably over £150,000 before you actually get into the business. That's a massive investment. A lot of the construction majors have taken away some of the support that used to be there for people to come into the business. So they won't underwrite finance anymore, and bits like that. So if you've got £150,000, how are you going to spend it? Personally, I go and buy a Lamborghini and a bottle of champagne. Rather than go buy a Volvo 8-wheel tipper.
Well, exactly. I think that's the you can spend that money you can make a lot more money with that without buying a truck. And I think for young people coming out of university, coming out of school, it doesn't look particularly attractive as an entrepreneur. It doesn't look particularly attractive. But then,
if you're looking for complete just return on investment, you're buying an asset that's going to depreciate because that truck will be worth less every year. Up until last year when it blipped slightly because suddenly your trucks were worth more because no one could buy a truck for love of the money because there's no chips, there's no this, there's no that, So exactly. I'd like a new truck, please, Mr. Volvo. Certainly, come and see me in 18 months' time and you might be able to have one. Oh, thank you very much. So suddenly there was a massive resurge in value, and I think that quite a few people pulled out of the industry at that point because it was an opportunity to. I've had an asset sat somewhere that's 50, 60, 70,000 pounds worth. 2 weeks later, it was 80 or 90,000 pounds worth. Well, that extra 20,000 pounds is my retirement pot. Thank you very much. So I'll sell that. No debt. That money goes in my pension, and then I can put my feet up. Thank you very much.
I think that there's not enough being done to kind of fill at the bottom. Like people are leaving and retiring at the top, and you're not filtering up. And I think, I've only been in the industry 4 years, so I can't see the trends that maybe yourself with 23 years experience, but I can't see I can't see what would attract a young person to join this game, if I'm honest.
No, it wouldn't. And I think my personal feeling is the future is in small fleet operators. And I think those businesses become of a size where they will become manageable. I think we will probably see, so transport majors, such as Wincantons, have tried to come into the construction industry, but I don't think they understand the construction industry. So they come in to base it as they would do an operation for a supermarket or similar, which operates a hub and spoke distribution system. It's fairly straightforward. They've got a lot of synergy with their existing businesses. There's very few that have come in and managed that transition into the construction industry because it's such a specialist industry. But it's definitely. I think when I look
it's not just specialist. It's not just specialist vehicles and specialist operations. It's also just the nature of the beast.
It is very much so.
It's so seasonal, but also as we highlighted with your phone call earlier, that changes because customers have different needs, and that's a bit different, I guess, to kind of doing regular runs to Asda's or whatever. It's like you tend to have a fairly set route, set regular kind of patterns of stuff.
Oh, you can it's like using planning software. Planning software such as Paragon works really, really well if that's what you're doing. If you try and use Paragon in the construction industry, well, you may as well just throw it out the window, really, to be honest with you, because it just, it's too, the way that works at the moment is not flexible enough to realise what we do, and you need that human interaction. So there used to be a job from a site, from one of my previous employers used to work at. If your truck left the site at 6 o'clock in the morning, you would be in and out of that job in 2 hours. If you left at 7 o'clock in the morning, you would be in and out of that job in 5 hours, purely due to the volumes of traffic and the routes you had to take. And really difficult to feed that into. You need the human interaction, because a planning software will look at that, the route from A to B, and say, that's a 2-hour job. But it's a 2-hour job at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's a 4-hour job at 7 o'clock in the morning. And it's really difficult to get that information into an automated planning system, which is why I think that we will never get away from.
I guess the future is AI. And sort of plugging in kind of
I think that's artificial intelligence,
machine learning,
industries.
AIs. Yeah. So using kind of machine learning and artificial intelligence to predict and look at traffic patterns, because the data is out there.
Oh, like with live traffic camera systems, it's all reported. If you could have planning software that cut into those, you could probably do that. But it would be a real massive step forward for someone to actually invest that money to create that system that would operate that in real time. You know?
Yeah. Interesting. I like that. I'm always. Can you take that?
That's not an important one. That's all right.
Okay. I was just saying I always like looking at the applications of digital systems into kind of into transport, because I think it's such an archaic, such an analog industry as a whole. It's ripe for innovation, which is obviously what we're trying to do with Hub. But also there's bits that we're never going to touch. There's bits of transport logistics we're never going to touch, and planning and scheduling is something that we've not really discussed as a team. But I think putting kind of machine learning on top of that will be a really interesting one, because I think you're going to start planning more sustainable routes as well.
Yeah, there's people that run multi-million-pound fleets on Excel spreadsheets and even on an A3 sheets of paper.
Yeah.
You know that's where it is.
I know. I've seen them. I've been into their offices. I've seen what their planning sheets look like. I went to one operator. I can't actually remember, so I can't name drop. But this was a few years ago now, and I think they had 50 or 60 vehicles, which is many millions of pounds worth of assets. Plus, like, I think they had like bagging plants and concrete plants, and kind of they ran their own little empire. And all their planning was just A3 pads of paper on the desk.
Yeah.
Under the keyboard. I was just like, how can you? I don't understand how you can manage the mental bandwidth. I'm impressed more than disappointed in the fact that you can genuinely run a business like that and not fall apart the seams.
A good planner will make or break your business, and likewise, a good planner working for a construction major will make or break the contract haulers that work for him. Because if you have a good planner, they will guide their way. They will understand what you need to do. If you have a poor planner, then we may as well all go home now, because we're never going to make any money in this game.
I was talking to another guest, Sean Connor, who will be. I don't know. I have no idea how we're going to order these, but I recorded his episode last week anyway. This is as an aside for our listeners. I know. We've had like a year of trying to do podcasts, and like the best ones, those well-performing ones, have been the ones with like real guests. Hence why we're doubling down on this. But it just means I spend my entire life I love it. I talk to people, but like I just record a lot. My voice is recorded a lot. There's a lot of me going around now, and I'm not gonna lie, I love it. But it means that I've got like, I think I've done 4 recordings, or will have done 4 recordings this week, in like a day and a half, and it's just so but talking to Sean, he was a driver, he's obviously a qualified driver, but came through that route and is now a TM, but he came through and did planning, and he sort of said that when he was doing planning, and I kind of asked the question, is planning, does it help being a driver? He said yes, it does. Some of the best planners tend to be drivers, But there are some planners that don't have to have driving experience, but understand and sympathise with a driver and the things they go through. And I think that's a really important point, is they've got to understand there's an actual person in that vehicle doing that job, dealing with the stress of that thing. I think that's really important as well.
Exactly. I used to find, when I did do some planning, what I used to find is that most drivers and most contract hauliers will plan themselves. If you sit with your sheet of work on your computer or your laptop, your A3 sheet of paper, if you start to understand what people like to do, so some drivers like to be up early and gone, some drivers like to have a lay-in and don't mind working a bit later, some guys like nights out, some guys like weekends, and once you get to know your drivers and you get to know what they want, you can almost let work plan itself, because you'll phone the driver and go, I've got 3 loads from A to B, do you want that? He goes, oh yeah, I like that one, brilliant. You know he might have a contact there so he can get a backhaul back, brilliant, because then he's absolutely happy as Larry.
And that comes back to, I think, what we were saying earlier, is the thing you like about Breedon's is it's very localized in it's very decentralized in decision making, and you get to know you don't treat people as cogs, you treat people as people, and you can only really do that in small business mentality. I think it does get lost when you kind of have the hierarchical kind of corporate structure. I think that's
Breedon has a nice family environment. We work to a national standard, and we obviously report in nationally. So I'll have to report back to my national logistics manager what's going on, but I am allowed a great deal of leeway in how we make that go on. And that means that the decisions are made locally. We can react quickly. We can therefore give a better service to our customers. We can have a better work experience for our contract haulers and our drivers.
Yeah, I think that's really important. You talked about, I mean, I think we said we weren't going to cover this, but fuck it, we'll go and do it anyway. You said about national standards. What is your view on fours?
I won't hold my hand up, but we might have to edit this out after I've done it. When fours was first introduced, I was a big fan of fours. Initially, I think there was a lot of people operating in the industry who didn't understand what they needed. I kind of think fours has educated a lot of people and brought everyone up to a minimum standard. What I disagree with about fours, when it was sponsored by TfL, it was fantastic. There was very little cost to the industry. It brought standards up marvellously. I think when fours became self-funding and they claimed that it has to change every so often because it's a progressive thing, I think some of the requirements in fours now are there to tick boxes, not to improve safety or to improve work or to improve the haulage environment. I think it's a thing that's seen its time. It's still at base level, it's still got some very good stuff in, but when you get to gold level, and one of the primary things for gold level is I'm going to write a puff piece about how fours has done for my business, I think is ludicrous. The best word I could think of to describe it. The case study has been taken out of version 6. It's now the way fours now do it is they'll take elements of all your other questions and make up their own case study so they can use it as a case study, because that was the reason they asked it to be done, was so that they could use it in their promotional material. But yeah, no, I agree. I think what it stands for and what it's trying to achieve is fantastic. I think the delivery method is questionable, I think is the way I would say that. What also
it's interesting. I've actually got Phil Breen from DVSA coming on after I'm recording a pod with him after I get off this one with you, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to go down, because I think error recognition is really cool. Mostly because it's a more like software based, like interacting with your systems. So that to me is kind of cool. But it's just interesting. Like obviously, as you know, the reason kind of John and I kind of started doing what we're doing and we merged into Hub and did all that sort of stuff was because of fours.
Yeah, I think one of the things about fours, a lot of the construction majors encourage people to go for fours, because when you achieve 4 silver, you obviously make clocks compliancy. And what a lot of the actual tier 1 contractors are looking for is not really 4 silver. What they're actually looking for is clocks compliancy. But a lot of the education of those people out there, people from those tier 1 contractors out there, they don't actually know that. So I sat in several meetings for major contracts, and explain the difference between fours and clocks to these people. I've written logistics submissions for major projects where I've had to explain the difference between fours and clocks to people. So I think clocks has kind of set a standard. That's the standard they want. They're not going to move that standard unless there's a major industry move because of where they are. So if an innovation becomes available, then I'm sure clocks will consider that and put that into their standard. But fours seem to change for the sake of it. And some things within fours became what I would describe as a box ticking exercise. And once one thing within that standard is a box ticking exercise, the whole thing may as well be a box ticking exercise because you're not going to put enough attention to doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think my biggest gripe with fours, and it might be that I have to self-regulate what I say now. I'll put my own hand up for this. I might get lambasted by. Well, no, I don't think. Well, I don't care. I'm the boss. I can do what the fuck I want, basically. But I think the standard on the whole is pretty good. I think the version 6 is significantly better than version 5. It took a lot of that box ticking stuff out that was self-justification, self-gratification for fours themselves. So I think the standard is good. I just think the implementation and also the fact that you can do it, you can pass it by faking so much of it for an audit does not mean you're running to a decent standard. It's one of the kind of, it sounds a bit like sales pitchy now, but I mean, I'll say it anyway, because I mean, I think when we originally started talking, it was about fours at Tarmac. That's why we started talking and having the conversation. It was, we operate differently to other kind of organizations to the sense that by using Hub and by doing things properly, you're actually operating to a higher standard. You're operating to a fours standard, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year. That's the point, I think. But it is too easy to fake it through. And it's a one-day audit, the entire thing. Yeah.
It's a one-day audit. So as long as your paperwork is in order for that one day, then, you know, and yes, they do. They say, well, I want to see the last 3 PMIs for that truck. But that's really, really basic, very simple compliance, you know. And there's that, if you can't produce that, you shouldn't actually be in the bloody industry. You know, you shouldn't need a standard to tell you that you need to be able to produce that paperwork.
Yeah, and I think that's where falls down a little bit. But that's, that's not going to get changed anytime soon. But I'd be interested to see what happens in the next 5 years in terms of kind of these accreditations and standards and stuff, because I think there's.
My feeling is that the industry will move away from it.
Yeah.
And it will find another standard that it wishes to, whether that's earned recognition or something. There's one or two people that have been looking at alternatives within the construction industry. I know MPQC are looking at standards. You know, there's all sorts of people looking at standards. Yeah. And I think that in certain circumstances, falls will still work. I mean, it's obviously still sponsored by TfL. I think TfL will maintain it within the sort of metropolitan area around London, but I think we will see changes certainly in the rest of the country.
Yeah. My prediction is
going live now with your prediction.
I know. I realise I was saying this like
dangerous.
I think if earned recognition can get their marketing right, and their go-to-market strategy, because at the end of the day, it has to operate like a business to get people on board to it, and it's an awareness piece. And also, if you're going to charge someone for something, you've got to make sure it's comparable or competitive or has a unique value to it. I think if earned recognition can get that, I think they'll sweep the floor.
And I think you said that you're going to be having a podcast with Phil Breedon. I think Phil Breedon is a fantastic ambassador for earned recognition. I've sat in a couple of meetings now that Phil's spoken to, and I think that he's an absolutely excellent ambassador for earned recognition. You know, the fact that he says, if anyone tells you earned recognition isn't standard, he goes, don't worry about it. He goes, I'll phone them up and tell them. You know, and he's a really very approachable, very good ambassador for that cause. Yeah.
And I'm hoping that can lead to positive change, because I think it's. I mean, competition is great between different standards, but I think what it does is, unless they're all comparable in terms of the actual outcomes for the haulier and for the environment they operate within, it's kind of not worth it. Like if everyone is at a standard and it's just choice between the kind of personal preference, that's great. But I think when like they're not comparable in terms of outcomes, I think if that's where it all falls down. But anyway, I think we've done 4s now. I think we can tick 4s off the list of things we've covered. I realised, just looked at the time, we've been going for a fair amount of time, and I've realised that you actually are during the day working at this point. I know you've taken a couple of calls, but I don't want to hold you up any longer. So I just want to kind of round out and say thank you very much for coming on. Is there anything, I know I'll try to ask one question. I say I don't do questions. You've been in the industry, obviously 23 years, as you said. Is there, maybe I'll see how this question goes. Is there what one piece of advice would you give former you at the start of their career in transport and logistics? What would you say to yourself 23 years ago?
Get a proper job.
Cool. I don't think I can leave that one in as a useful soundbite. I mean, I'll leave it in because I think it's fun. But yeah,
it's just on that. When I went from working for AI, when TDG took over that particular section of AI's haulage, I completed the TDG Transport Management course. There were 10 of us on this particular course. It was led by Loughborough University, and the lecturer from Loughborough University asked everybody at the beginning of the seminar, he says, put your hand up now if you left school wanting to go and work in transport and logistics as a transport manager. The 10 people in the class I was in, everyone was sat on their hands. And he then said, he goes, I have done hundreds of these courses, taken thousands of people through this seminar. He goes, I've only ever had one person who said it was his ambition to go and become a transport manager and work in logistics. I think it tends to be an industry that you fall into. So my first job for the small operator, that was initially taken on as sales, to do sales from. He needed someone to do sales and marketing. I wanted to work in sales and marketing. But because it was a small business, you have to have many hats on. So one of my hats became transport management, and unfortunately the sales and marketing soon departed and the transport management hat stayed there for the last 23 years.
Well, that's but then also being an account manager, as you say, you're representing the business. I think everyone is part of sales and marketing in more or less a degree. So I think that's important as well. But yeah, I think I've had quite a few conversations with people over the last few weeks regarding the podcast, kind of getting other kind of people and experts, and it, without fail, it's the same thing each time. It is, I kind of fell into it. I didn't really choose it; it chose me, but then. I don't think that's actually a bad thing. I didn't necessarily set out to do what I do now. Well, this is a whole other conversation, but I don't think school actually prepares you for the real world anymore. I think unless you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or a one word thing that is like, I went to an academic school, unless you want to be one of those things, like I wanted to be a marine biologist. That was my dream. Like, oh, what's that? How do I do that? There's not a job. That's not, you're not supported in that. So, yeah.
You want to be a marine biologist, and here you are running the hub rather than being a marine biologist.
Well, exactly. But my little one, we went away to Egypt for a holiday last year, and went obviously to the Red Sea and went snorkeling, and she's very much a nerd when it comes to fish and sea life. I'm like, okay, maybe I can encourage her to go and do that. There's fuck all money in it, so I mean, maybe not, but yeah. If you
Dave Attenborough's a biologist, he makes plenty of money, so you'd be all right.
Well, yes, and I must say, I mean, very, very quick aside. When I went on my gap year, I met someone. I did some conservation work. Because I said in my university course, oh yeah, I'll take a gap year to do conservation work. I thought, okay. So when they offered me a place, I was like, well, I better go and actually do that conservation work now. I have to go and pick a project to work on. But I met someone when I was out there, and she now is either director or producer of Blue Planet, and gets to go knows David Attenborough, goes all around the world. So yeah, it can be done, but it's like a lot of things. It's the 1% of an industry that does well. But yeah, so thank you very much, Justin, for the glamorous end, exactly. So I think we'll round it out there. So yeah, thank you very much, Justin, for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it kind of, I hope you like telling a story. I know I've enjoyed kind of hearing, like you only really see and hear the here and now when you kind of talk to people in like the work environment. It's nice to hear a background and what got you to where you are today. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Alan.
Yeah. And yeah, I will, I think we'll round out there and, I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. It's been enlightening. I've never been podcasted before.
Well, there you go. And I hope, I'm not going to say it. No, don't say it. Thank you very much for listening. And I'll see you guys next time on the Morning Cuppa.
Have a good one. Bye, mate.
Thank you so much to Justin for joining me this week. And thank you so much for listening. If you like this week's episode of The Morning Cuppa, be sure to go ahead and leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast from. That will help us get in front of even more transport professionals just like you. As always, you know I love to chat, so go ahead and find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, using the links that will be around somewhere. Anyway, that's all from me. Once again, thanks for listening to the show. I've been Alan, and this has been The Morning Cuppa Podcast.